A lot of families look great from the outside. In pictures, families are shown with warm smiles. It's easy to make holiday meals and tell stories like they're family heirlooms. The real story of some families, like the Guthries, is not in what was said but in what was carefully avoided saying. Anne and Nancy Guthrie. Two women, one family tree. A relationship that was so complicated, silent, and full of hidden feelings that not even the people closest to them knew what was really going on. What kind of people were they? Were they just a mom and daughter dealing with the normal stresses of family life? Or did the two of them have such deep hurts that they couldn't tell the truth about their story for years, or even forever? This is what we know. There are big secrets in the Guthrie family, but every family has them. It wasn't holidays or old fights that were forgotten or brushed off. These were the kinds of secrets that changed people's lives, affected choices, and left behind signs that could not be seen. Even scarier, the people who knew bits and pieces of the truth decided to stay quiet, not because they were mean, but because they loved others and thought that was what love required. Place a dot. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain. We sit in the story's quiet rooms and ask the questions that have been left unanswered for too long. Because saying it out loud can be the most important thing you can do for yourself and your family. Here is the story that no one knows about Nancy and Anna Guthrie. Imagine living in a small town where everyone knows your name but not much about your life. A spot where rocking chairs are set up on front porches, where people wave hello all the time, and where word of mouth spreads faster than truth. That's how Nancy Guthrie grew up. And in a lot of ways, she never really left that world. Nancy wasn't the type of woman who looked for attention. To be truly thoughtful, she was quiet in that way that people who are quiet, alert, and careful pick their words like they cost something. It was said that she was slightly attractive by people who knew her when she was younger. Not the biggest person, but often the one you thought of most after leaving. Some people would say that she married a young man when she was still young, but no one told her that directly. The man she picked was reliable and worked hard. The kind of person who made sure the fridge was always full and the lights on. But Nancy would learn over time that stability is not the same as warmth. And having enough food in the pantry won't make you feel better if your heart is empty. Anna was born at a time when things were pretty quiet in New York. A birth in the winter, when it was cold outside and hard inside. Like right away, there was something about Anna that made her seem older than her years. People who came to the Guthrie home, even when Anna was a baby, would say that she seemed to be watching all the time. They would say this with love and a hint of unease. A mother and her kid. At first glance, it seems like a very normal story. A mom taking care of her kid and doing the best she could with what she had. When you look more closely, though, the appearance changes. New York stays quiet about some things. Anna's questions were always gently steered in a different direction. The pictures on the mantel that were missing parts, faces were cropped out, and the frames were tilted just a bit. Something was always said but not heard in that house. Not exactly something bad, but something that hadn't been solved and that both women had been thinking about for years without ever going straight for. Whatever it was, that thing that wasn't said would change Anna's whole idea of who she was. After that, she would look for answers in places her mother hadn't meant for her to. She would be pulled down paths that were hard, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful, but they were important in the end. This story is not about bad guys. It's not a story about who is to blame. It's about two women who loved each other in the kind of difficult, flawed, deeply human way that families love. It's also about the truths that love can bury and then finally set free. There is a single moment, a single choice, a single door that quietly closes and is never opened that holds a secret. Once more. For the family Guthrie. Anna was not old enough at that point to understand what was going on around her. Nancy had a life before everyone else did. That may sound dramatic, but it's the truth. Before she got married, moved to a small town, got rocking chairs for the front porch, and became Nancy, Nancy was someone else. She was freer, less sure of herself, and more alive in the way that young people are alive when they haven't learned to be careful yet. With the people she met, she changed in deep ways. She had hopes and dreams that didn't quite fit into the life she picked. She also closed a very important part of her life so firmly and deliberately that she never talked about it again. Not to her husband, not to her best friends, and not at all to Anna.
Why, that's the
question that's worth thinking about. Why do people hide the parts of themselves that are hard to explain? It's sometimes shame. It's sometimes a way to protect yourself. It's a painful thought that sometimes telling the truth would hurt the people you care about more than keeping quiet ever could. It was likely all three for Nancy. She was a woman who dealt with her pain in private, who kept her cool like armor, and who truly felt that some things were better left unsaid. However, there is something important to know about buried facts. They don't go away. As they become part of a family's life, they grow slowly but steadily in the strangest ways. Anna grew up in a home where questions were often answered before they were fully asked. It wasn't because Nancy was rude. She wasn't. It wasn't because she was cold. She was taking things slowly. Really loved each other, but there was a trend. Some things made the air shift. When New York heard certain names, something in her face shut down, like a window closing against the wind. I noticed this right away. Kids always do. They can pick up on feelings that adults think they've properly hidden better than anyone else in the house. By the time Anna was a teenager, she had a mental list of things that were just not okay to talk about or write down. Her mother was a young adult. There were some cousins on NY's side that were never talked about. In the middle of the 1970s, there was a year that seemed to miss from every family story. Anna did not try. Not at first. What she had inherited. She has some of her mother's careful personality. Since she had to wait, she watched, listened, and thought about what she had seen and heard. She couldn't have said for what reason. But the questions kept coming up because that's what happens when you don't answer them. They stay bright over time. They add up. They become a part of your identity, your sense of where you come from, and you need to know who you are and why you are the way you are. Anna Guthrie was a young woman who didn't fully understand her family history. And that quiet, insistent, unyielding missing piece would be the thing she searched for her whole adult life. Everything changed for Anna on what seemed like a normal afternoon. She was visiting her mother, who was in her late 20s and lived in a different city. She was making her own life. When she found something in the closet's back. She hadn't meant to open a box that didn't look odd. The kind of cardboard box that anything could fit in. Tax forms from years ago, holiday decorations, and books you forgot about. But this box had letters inside. They were handwritten and tied together with a bit of string that was soft and slightly frayed from age. It was almost like Anna put them back. However, the first package had a name on it that she didn't know, and that wasn't written by her mother. The address on the back came from a place 3 states away. The postmark said 197 4. She stood in that closet for a long time, the air thick with dust motes and the sound of her mother moving around in the kitchen below. The letters in her hands held all the weight they had been carrying for decades. That day, she didn't read them. She carefully put them back where she found them. But she couldn't get rid of the thought of that box. She brought it with her on the drive back to her city, and it sat next to her when she went to sleep and woke up. She knew, with the quiet confidence that comes from deep inside, that she could not leave that question unanswered. Anna didn't tell her mother about it for months. It gave her time to think about what she really wanted, whether it was information, understanding, or something softer and harder to name like connection, and how to ask without hurting anyone. When she finally did ask, it was easy. There was a woman sitting across from Nancy at the kitchen table, where they had eaten 1,000 normal meals together. She told her mother, "Mom, I found some letters in the closet from 1974 from someone who was writing to you from out of state." The next pause was one of the longest in Anna's life. It wasn't denied by Nancy. She didn't do any confusion. For a long time, she just looked at her daughter with a face that Anna would later describe as that of someone putting down a very big bag. Then Nancy spoke slowly at first, and there were long breaks where you could hear the house breathing. She did talk, though. Over the next few hours, not just one secret came out, but several that were linked together and explained the shape of the necks. New York had been in a serious relationship before she met Anna's father, and it changed the course of her whole life. Things aren't that simple in real life, though. That being said, the truth does not always hit us the way we thought it would. For Anna, the news made you feel lost. It can't be said in a nicer way. When the framework of your family story changes, even just a little, the ground beneath you moves. All of a sudden, things that had never quite made sense, a certain amount of stress around holidays, an unwillingness to look at old photos again, and a lack of communication around certain years, felt both reassuring and deeply unsettling. She had a kind of quiet reckoning with herself for weeks after that talk. Not just angry, but more like someone who had been reading a book with blank pages and then found them out of the blue. Place a dot. She thought about what it would be like to carry something for so long. How much someone has to pay to keep a secret for decades, not just a year or two. To her own surprise, she found that the thing she felt most strongly wasn't anger at. Not her mother, but more like sadness. Feel bad for the younger Nancy for the decisions she made when she was rushed. They had been silent for years, which had been hard on both of them without realizing it. Nancy, on the other hand, didn't feel lighter after telling the truth. Not right away. Silence that has been practiced for decades doesn't go away in one evening. But after that, there was something strange about her face. Anna wasn't sure if she had ever seen that kind of softness around the edges before. This made the two women start talking in a different way. Anna began to ask questions she had never been afraid to ask before. She did so more carefully and more honestly. Not questioning her, never that, but being interested in her and wondering where she might have been years ago if only there had been space. And Nancy replied. It took weeks and months, but she finally answered. Over those weeks and months, a much more complex picture of her mother emerged than the one Anna had grown up with. Her mother wasn't just a quiet woman from a small town who got married and raised a family. She was a young woman with passions and contradictions whose love had flowed in unexpected ways, limited by the time she lived in by expectations placed on her and her own deep-seated desire to protect those around her at the expense of her own story. It was both heartbreaking and beautiful to find out that a parent is a whole person. This is the kind of growing up that happens